We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Gimel Amid Aleph in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 63a. And the previous summit, the Gemara said that kefil applies to all items. And the Gemara said, why is that the case? The animals that are listed in the pasuk in the klal uprado klal, they are all animals that convey tumah through maga and masa, through touching and carrying. So maybe we should exclude ophos, which do not convey tumah through maga umasa. They should be excluded from kefil. And the Gemara finishes the thought to hakol chad v'chad klal uprat be'apei nafshe darshinan lei. Because when you do a klal upratu klal, each prat that is there is its own klal upratu klal. Avalofos lo, and therefore birds would not be included. And Rashi explains the kol chad v'chad klal uprat be'anpei nafshe darshinan like kolomar. What the Gemara means to say is as follows: Heichad diika prata yiseri. When you have a bunch of prats, that's what you have in this case, a bunch of items that are listed. Kol chad v'chad marbi ke'ein didei. Each one includes things that are similar to it. V'lo darshinan kulu b'hadei hadadi. We don't say that we take all the prats together in darshan. De lahave ke'ein haprat de salmo l'rabos b'alei chayim she'ein neveilasan metama. Because if you would take them all together, so one of the items in the list is salma. It refers to a garment, so that's obviously not an animal. That might include also balei chayim, where the nevela is not tameh. B'ma'ago v'masa kedamar l'kamon, like we say later on, kedetani devei Chizkiya, like it's taught in the yeshiva of Chizkiya, shadi shor bein himatzei l'timatzei, shadi chamor bein himatzei l'timatzei. We say later on that you put the word shor between the words himatzei timatzei. You put chamor over there. Alma kol chad v'chad ba'apei nafshe midrash. The point is that you darshan them all independently. That's what we're saying over there, and that's what we're saying over here as well. So since we're not darshaning all the prats collectively, so therefore again you're going to end up excluding ophos. And the Gemara says, Imkain, if that was the case, so nichtav rachman achad prata, then the pasuk only needed to write one prat. You didn't need to write all of these prats. The fact that we wrote all of them actually is going to end up including ophos. Rashi explains, Imkain dechain haprat bechod stadin hu demaisi. If we're saying that it's similar, it has to be similar in all ways to the prat, lo nichtav elachad, just write one of the prats. Mehani prati of these prats, the balei chayim of the living animals. In other words, you list a bunch of animals, just write one of the animals. Rabbi kein haprat kol shenivlasu metame will say, as long as the nevela is metame b'mag uv'masa, as long as it's similar, so then it's included in kefil. Umidekasa prata yiseires. So from the fact that we wrote extra prats to name inyan l'rabos shar balei chayim, obviously the idea is to include other living creatures, meaning to include ophos. But the Gemara continues, Hey Nichtov, if we're only going to write one of the prats, so Hey Nichtov Rachmana, which one should the pasuk write? Ikaz of Rachmana Shor, if the Torah, let's say, only wrote Shor. So Hava Amina, Karv L'Gavi Mizbeach, in Shein Karv L'Gavi Mizbeach Lo, I would say only animals that are brought on the Mizbeach, animals that are not brought on the Mizbeach, it doesn't apply. Because of Rachmana Chamor, and let's say the pasuk only wrote Chamor, Hava Amina, Kodesh B'Bechora, and I would say only animals that have the sanctity of the firstborn, so for that it applies. Shein Kodesh B'Bechora Lo, but if it's not an animal with the sanctity of the firstborn, it doesn't apply. Amri, so they say, Imkein nichtov rachmana shor v'chamor. But if that was the case, then we could just write shor and chamor. Selamali, what do we need to write the word seh for? Shmamino alasuye ophos. So it comes to include birds. That extra word seh, you didn't really need that word. That's how we know ophos. But the Gemara says, Ve'ema lasuye ophos tahorim, dum yodesed mithame begadim abeis habliya. Maybe it only comes to include ophos that are kosher. That's similar to seh, because at least there's some kind of tumah by ophos tahorim. The halach is that if you have an oph tahor, that's an avela, so it's mitame. If a person swallows it, that's the beis habliya, the area where you swallow it in the throat. If it goes in that area, it causes tumah, and also tumah to the clothing. Aval ophos tameim, but maybe birds that are not kosher, the less behu tumah, the lo mitame begadim abeis habliya, there's no tumah there at all. They're not mitame begadim abeis habliya, so maybe therefore there we would not include those kind of ophos. How do you know to include those kind of ophos? And the Gemara says to that, kol ribuyu, the word kol in the pasuk is an inclusion. It includes those kind of ophos as well. And Rashi explains, Kadosh b'bechora, again, if it had chamor, I would think it has to be something that has, some animal that has the sanctity of the firstborn. Ke'ein shor v'sehu d'misrabe, micha'ein haprat chamor, similar to shor and seh, it's included, it's got to be similar to chamor. The damile bitlost stadin, the point is that it has to be similar in all three ways, the following three ways. Balei chayim, it has to be a living animal. U'bebechora, it has the sanctity of the firstborn. V'nivlaso metame, and also the nevela causes tumah. And if we would understand it like that, so we would exclude the the following. Avol tzviva ayil, but when you're talking about a deer or a gazelle, the lo dami le'ela betarti, that's only similar in two ways, but they don't have the kedusha of the bechor, so no, that would not be included. La'achik kasav shor, that's why it says shor, dim eino inyan lo, t'neu inyan, l'she'eno kadosh bebechor. You don't need it for the shor itself, so therefore instead you should apply shor and say that it doesn't have to be kadosh bebechora. The dami mios betarti leprata balechayim v'nivlasu matam. It only has to be similar in two ways. Balechayim and the nevela is tameh. Uliolam ofos lo. We would still be excluding ofos at this point in time. And then the Gemara said, "Im hachigarsin im kain lichtov rachmana shor v'chamor se lamali." You still don't need se lasuye ofos. That's to include ofos. But then the Gemara said, "Ve'ema tahorin the dami leprata ksas." Maybe a kosher bird that's somewhat similar to the prat. Diyesh tuma benivlasum ksas. There is some tuma by the nevela. L'tame bebeis habliya, because when it's a kosher bird, so then there's tuma bebeis habliya. Aval ofos tameim lo. But let's say it's a not kosher bird, maybe that shouldn't be included. The lesbu tuma, there is no tuma kedisa b'chulin, like it says in chulin. Yachol te nivlas of tamim etame begadim bebeis habliya. I might think that the nevela of a non-kosher bird is tamim bebeis habliya and is metame begadim in the beis habliya. Talmud lomar nevela utrefa lo yochel tamim ba mishe yisura misham bal tochal nevela utrefa. We're talking specifically about an animal that you only can't eat it, a bird that you only can't eat it because it's an nevela or treifa. Yatza said that would exclude a non-kosher bird. Sheini sura misham bal tochal nevela or treifa. There, it's not that you can't eat it because it's an nevela or treifa. Ela misham bal tochal tameh. The reason why you can't eat it is because it's not a kosher bird, and so therefore that is not included in the halacha of tumas begadim bebeis habliya. So how do you know to include that? And again, the Gemara said that is learned from the word kol. But the Gemara continues, V'chol hecha d'chasav kol ribuyahu. But is it really true that anytime it says the word kol, that is an inclusion, like we're saying over here? V'hagabe meiser. But what about what we find by meiser sheni? T'chsiv kol v'kodarshinan le b'chlal uprat. There you have the word kol, and we don't say that the kol is an inclusion. We darshan it; it's a regular klal uprat. The Tanyas will learn in a brayso of nasato hakesef b'chol asher ta'av nafshech. It's talking about the money that you redeem the meiser sheni on. You're supposed to spend it. So first it says you spend it on anything. Klal, that's a generalization. Then it says a bunch of specifics, babakur, uvatzon, uvayayin, uvashecher, prat, all of those are specifications. And then it says, uvachol asher tesholcha nafshecha, spend it on anything you want. Chazru klal, that's another klal. Klal uprat uklal, yat hadon elakain haprat. The rule is, again, if you have a klal uprat uklal, it's anything that is similar to the prat. Ma haprat meforish primi pri v'gedulei karka. Just like everything that is specified is a primi pri, that's a fruit from another fruit, and it also grows or gets its nourishment from the ground. I've called primi pri v'gedulei karka. So till we learn it's got to be similar, anything that's a primi pri v'gidulei karka. And Rashi explains primi pri, a fruit from another fruit, that means vlad mi vlad, that just means something that's an offspring from something else. That's an offspring v'gefen mechartzon, for example, you have a vine from a chartzon. Lemu'ute maim, that would exclude water, or melach, or salt, uchmeinu pitrios, and mushrooms, those things are not considered primi pri. And gidulei karka, lemu'ute dagam, gidulei karka means it gets its nourishment from the earth, that excludes fish that they get from the water, and so therefore again it has to be similar in those ways, primi pri v'gedulei karka, only that can be bought with kesef meiser. In any case, the point over here is that you have the word bakol in this pasuk, and we're not treating it as an inclusion, we're treating it as a regular klal upratu klal. And the Gemara says, Amri, they answer bakol klol. If it says the word bakol, v'nasato akesa bakol ashatav v'nafshecha, so that's considered a klal. But kol, but if it just says the word kol without the base, ribuyahu, that is an inclusion. V'bay same, and if you want, I could say another answer, kol kololahu. If it says the word kol, it is considered to be a klal, it's a generalization. Miu kol dohacha, nevertheless, the kol over here, ribuyahu, it's actually an inclusion. Why? Because michli, let us see, ksiv mei kara klalu pratu klal, it already has a klalu pratu klal in this context when we're talking about kefel. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, kiyitein ishal re'eo klal, it says kiyitein ishal re'eo, that's a klal, anything you give to somebody. Kesef okelim, then it says kesef okelim prat, that's a specification, silver or vessels. Lishmor, and then it says to watch, hadru klal, that's another klal, and so therefore you already have a klalu pratu klal. V'isal gadayta chay al kol dvar pesha nami lechlalu pratu dasa. So if you're saying this pasuk also of al kol dvar pesha that we're talking about, that's also for klalu pratu klal. So nichtov rachmana lahani prati gavehech, take these specifics and write them by the other one. Klalu prat al kol dvar pesha lamali. What do we need the klalu prat by al kol dvar pesha? Shma mina ribuyahu. So you see that the kol is actually an inclusion. And Rashi explains, Michti Ksiv, let us see, it's written, Barosh HaParsha, at the very beginning of the Parsha, it already says, Klal Uprat, it has a Klal Uprat, Ki Ite Nish, V'darshina Leve Parak Hazov, L'Inyan Shvuas Shomrim, we already darshan this Klal Uprat to Klal, we darshan it in Parak Hazov, L'Meimar Deinish Bon Ela Al Ke'in HaPrat, Shemetal Tel V'Guf HaMamon, we say that you only take a Shvu on things that are like the Prat, it's a movable object, and it has monetary value, intrinsic monetary value. V'Sal Gadai Dachai Al Kol Dvar Pesha, so if you're going to say Al Kol Dvar Pesha is also a Klal Uprat to Klal, the Asalinian Kefel, and that has to talk about Kefel, Lemidushe B'Chlalu Prat, so that also, again, we're going to do a Klalu Prat to Klal by Kefel, V'lo Misrabi L'Kefel Elokein HaPrat, and we're only including things that are similar to the Prat, we're not having this additional inclusion of Kol, so L'Chdevinu Lahani Prate B'Kra Kamma, just write them all, write all of the Prats, write them in the first Pasuk, V'lidrosh Kol Chad B'Apei Nafshi, darshan each one by itself, Kidu Kamma, like we said, Da B'Kra Kamma Namik Felixiv, because in that first Pasuk, where we're making a drush in terms of Shua Shomrin, it also mentions Kefel. It must be that the klal in the later pasuk is actually an inclusion. That's the idea that kol is an inclusion. As far as kefel, we don't just do a simple klal uprat. Ukra Kamma dechsib beklal uprat, in that first pasuk, which does have a klal uprat. Again, the pasuk of Ki Yitei Nishal Reyehu L'Inyan Shvu Hudaso K'Dechsib Basrei. That's talking about Shvu, as it says right after V'Nikra Balabayis V'Gomer. But the Gemara continues, Hashta de Amr Kol Ribuya, but now that we're saying that the Kol is an inclusion to go beyond the Klal Upratu Klal, so Kol Hani Prati Lamali, so what's the point of all the Prats in the Pasuk? And the Gemara says to that, Chad Lemute Karka, one of the Prats excludes Karka, again we said that's excluded from the Halach of Kefel, V'chad Lemute Avodim, one is to exclude Avodim, V'chad Lemute Shtaros, one is to exclude Shtaros, and Salma Lemute Davar She'enu Mesuyim, Salma excludes something that is not Mesuyim. Rashi says that means Lemute Davar She'enu Mesuyim, it's something that there is the owner doesn't have a siman, doesn't have some kind of sign on it to prove it's his. Shepater mi kefel, such an item is pater from kefel. There are other explanations in the Rishonim what it means davar she'eino mesuyim. In any case, al kol aveda, and when the pasuk says al kol aveda, what's that for? L'chid Rabbi Yechia bar Abba, it's for the teaching of Rabbi Yechia bar Abba. To Yamar Rabbi Yechia bar Abba on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yechia bar Abba said that Rabbi Yochanan said, hatoin tainas ganav, if somebody's a toin tainas ganav, will go on to say that the person is watching an aveda, he's towing tainas ganav by an aveda, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Gimel Amud Beis.